Hey everybody, so we're going to get into the Essential Foundation workshop, and before we get into some of the do's and don'ts or the foundational information of how we approach nutrition, exercise, and toxicity here at Bold City, I want to first explain a little bit about what this version of the Essentials Foundation class is going to look like, and then also get into where we're at and the reason why we do this as frequently as we do within the office. And to get into it, this version of the Essentials Foundation class is going to be a lot more streamlined. It's going to be a little bit more faster paced because you have access to this at any point. You can rewatch different sections. You can share this with family members and friends. I'm not going to be able to take your questions, but if you do have specifics, be sure to list them below in the comments section, and I'll absolutely be sure that I can address those with you individually. We're going to still go through action steps that you can take right away in regards to this information, but with the workshop itself that we do live, it's a little bit slower paced. We have more time to explain different concepts. So this is going to be a little bit faster paced. Be sure that you comment down below with any questions or comments that you may have. And then secondly, the reason that we do this so frequently comes in two different or multiple reasonings with it. The first and most importantly, the reason that this is done every single month, either in office, live, or online, is because there's a huge need for this information in our culture. Arguably the most important way, or the easiest, most straightforward way that we would determine whether or not a country is healthy or not is how it stacks up against other industrialized countries. And when you look at America, the United States, in comparison to most other industrialized countries, we are consistently towards the bottom of those rankings. When it comes to infant mortality, we're routinely in the bottom. Overall health grades from the World Health Organization had us 37th or so amongst other countries that are considered industrialized or more modern countries. And I think that statistic alone would be somewhat shocking to most Americans because this is America. We have access to more information. We have access to more screening procedures. We have access to more medications. And all of those things that we spend our money on as a country, we would think, I would think that we would see better grades. But when you look at how we compare in adulthood and childhood, Americans are consistently towards the bottoms of those health rankings and in those health markers. Some of the other statistics of where we fall in our culture, when we go back and look at our youth, is that right now 25% of children 5 and up have plaque forming in their arteries, and 60% of 15 to 19-year-olds have plaque forming in their arteries. So when you look at those numbers, when children 5 and up, the likelihood of coming across a child with plaque in their arteries is 1 in 4. And then it goes more than half, greater than 50% when you look at and isolate the population of 15 to 19-year-olds. And what that's saying is that we're just not doing enough to be proactive in regards to our health. How we approach nutrition can be somewhat confusing. How we approach exercise can certainly be confusing. And then how we look at toxins is absolutely one of these areas that just leaves a ton of questions for most people, and especially most Americans. When you look at them, something like asthma, 1 in 10 children have asthma, and that number is continuing to grow. When you look at something like type 2 diabetes, that number consistently grows more and more each year. It's actually becoming something that is projected by the World Health Organization to contribute to nearly 8 million deaths worldwide by the year 2030. So when you look at some of these numbers, in America, we are not doing everything that we could be doing, and we're not getting nearly the reward of our hard work that we're putting into trying to make these health decisions because we have access to so much. So that really leads to the biggest problem of what has gotten us to this point. It's not lack of information. I would argue that we have too much information in a lot of areas. And that information itself can be very, very confusing, certainly can be misleading. And as consumers, the companies that are manufacturing these products that we buy on a daily basis, or we feed our family, or that we use consistently, are marketed towards us in a less than honest way in most cases. So when we get into the nutrition info, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is ways that you can streamline the misinformation out there. We'll give some really solid action steps of how you can make this much more practical. So we're going to go through a lot of the why we need to change in this section, and then some of the other workshops that we're going to talk about and that you can get signed up for is going to be the practical side. So as we talk about this and as we get into this information, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them down below, and I'll make sure that I can answer any of those questions or get back to you as quickly as possible. But we're going to really jump into nutrition, exercise, and toxicity. And really the first thing that leads us into where we're at, what has gotten us to this point, is this myth that our genes contribute to majority of what we see as a result of our health. It doesn't matter how much we work, how much effort we put in. If our family member has a history of something, then we're ultimately going to see the same things that they saw. And that sort of misinformation is very defeating to a lot of people. We've had patients come in, their doctors have prescribed them things like statin medications or high blood pressure medication, not because they had any symptoms or warning signs of that being an issue, but because their family, their parents or grandparents had that, and they were prescribing it preventatively. So even the doctors that we're going to are feeding into this myth that it doesn't matter what we do. Ultimately, if our family history says we're going to get it, then we're going to get the same things. And that is the complete opposite way of how we approach health. At Bold City, we look at health very, very much as you have the power to allow your body to do exactly what it was created to do, which is heal and function at 100%. As long as we're removing interference and we're giving our body exactly what it needs to function and heal as it was created. And when it comes to nutrition or exercise or toxicity, the thing that sparks all of this is how our brain and spinal cord communicate to every cell, tissue, and organ in the body. So when we look at something like healing, it's very easy to say that, nutrition is going to heal me, or these supplements will heal me, or this medication, or this exercise or detox program or fill in the blank is going to heal me, when in reality, healing is always going to come from above down. I mean, it's coming from the brain down the spinal cord out to every cell, tissue, and organ in your body, and it takes 100% of that signaling from the brain for your body to do exactly what it was created to do every single time. And if there's interference at any one of those segments in the spine, it's going to limit our body's ability to absorb nutrients, to get the most out of exercise, to detox properly, to take in oxygen, to regulate blood sugar or hormones. All of these things are going to be affected when our brain and spinal cord aren't able to communicate to the rest of the body the way that it was created to. So how that plays into factor with nutrition, exercise, and toxicity is that if we don't know where our spine is, how that signaling is coming from the brain, if we don't know with certainty that we're getting all the information that we can, we're working harder than we need to. So think about that for just 1 second. We could be eating all the best foods, taking all the best supplements, exercising our butt off, going through all these crazy intense detox programs, and still be seeing warning signs like asthma or headaches or menstrual issues, hormone imbalances, blood sugar imbalances. All of these things could still potentially be going on even when we're doing all of the right things, and it's because our brain and body aren't able to communicate with each other. So as we get into this, and if you see some of these things that we talk about, like checking a box of the things that you're already doing, just know that if there's a gap or a misinformation or a miscommunication between brain and body, there's got to be something else going on. And all of these symptoms that we deal with as a culture, the neck pain, the dizziness, the fatigue, all of these things are a sign that our body is working harder than it has to, and our healing potential is absolutely limited. So if you or your family members or friends are dealing with any of those things that we just talked about, I encourage you to get them plugged into either our office. They can go to boldcityhealth.com and they can request an appointment. They can go to maxliving.com. They can find an office. A family can plug in with one of our Max Living family members and get evaluated to see what exactly is going on and where that gap in communication from brain to body is, because they are absolutely not getting all they can if they don't know how their body's healing and functioning. And it starts at the nervous system component. So as we get into talking about then how it's not necessarily this genetic component that's hardwired into your DNA to make you live up to what your family members have dealt with in the past. We look at one specifically, a field of study called epigenetics, and it looks at how we can turn on or off genes that are going to build health or cause a disease process to start. And when you look at something specific like diabetes, they've actually found that right now, with type 2 diabetes specifically, 95% of all cases are treatable and preventable through healthy lifestyle and proper diet. So not only eating right or exercising or minimizing your exposure to toxins, but managing stress, making sure that your brain and body are communicating together. All of those things are going to come into importance when we're looking at something like type 2 diabetes. And when we get into the numbers of it, right now 1 in 3 Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the really scary part about that is that if you look at the American population, there's nearly 300 million Americans. So if 1 in 3 are diabetic or pre-diabetic, that means that there's 100 million Americans walking around with this disease process going on that is preventable and treatable in 95% of all cases. And then you look at some of the even more scary numbers that build on that. 25% of those people have no idea that this is even going on. So when you look at 100 million Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic, 25 million of them have no idea that this is even an issue. They have no idea that they're dealing with this process or their body is creating this huge inflammatory process that is leading for much, much larger disease processes down the road. So when you look at then how those numbers play worldwide, 346 million people are diabetic worldwide. So when we say how that plays into the numbers of America versus the world, we have nearly 100 million Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic, but there's only 346 million people worldwide. So we have nearly a third of the population in the entire world of diabetics are residing in America. And 25% of those people don't know that they're even dealing with it. So when we talk about the importance of nutrition or exercise or toxicity or healthy lifestyle, chiropractic specifically, and most importantly, there's absolutely a lot that we can do. And as we get into it, we're going to talk about my go-to self-check when we look at some of these areas and whether or not we truly value what we say we value. So when we look at it, you have to ask yourself these questions. And these are all questions that I ask myself pretty much routinely as my own self-check, because there are times when I fall off track or I maybe don't make decisions that I would make if I were being 100% on fire, ready to go, making all the changes. As we do this long term, it's easy to take vacations or slow down. So I have to reevaluate and reassess. And I do so by asking myself these questions. How much thought or time am I putting into planning and shopping for the meals that my family and I are going to eat throughout the week? If I find myself relying on things that are more pre-prepared, even though they may be healthy, it's going to cost either a lot more or I'm going to have to budget the time. So those two are inversely connected with one another, time or money. If you want to save money, you have to put more time in. And if you want to save time, then you're going to spend more money for quality nutrients. So ask yourself, are you putting thought into the food that you and your family are eating? Have you ever said it's too expensive to eat healthy, but you can still manage to go into Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever to grab a cup of coffee and spend $3, $4, $5 at the drive-thru, but then question whether or not you'd want to spend $3, $4 on a dozen free-range eggs? Have you ever said, I don't have time for exercise, but then you can still manage to watch your 1 or 2 favorite TV shows each day or a few hours of TV every week? And when we look at exercise, just to get into that for 1 second, we're not talking about exercising in an efficient manner. Most people say they don't have time to exercise an hour or 2 every day, 5, 6 days a week. And when we talk about exercise at Bolt City and within Max Living, we're not talking about that type of exercise either. We're talking about a very efficient form of exercise that focuses on intense work for 12 to 15 minutes. And then we see a benefit for nearly 36 hours afterwards and a more efficient metabolism, stabilizing hormones, and other things. So when we say I don't have time for exercise, we need to, 1, look at the type of exercise you're talking about, and then also look at where we value our health in general, because we absolutely have 15 to 20 minutes 3 to 5 days a week that we can focus on really working and getting our heart rate up. The next self-check question that I ask myself is, do we value or do we say we're willing to make change, but we don't necessarily want to change? So what I'm meaning by that is, do I say my health's a priority as long as I don't have to do anything different, or as long as it's not too inconvenient? And I think that that's one of those questions that most people kind of subtly would agree with, but maybe not want to admit they agree with. As Americans, we are very much a product of our culture, wanting things quickly. We can heat our food up pretty much rapidly with the microwave. We can DVR and watch different shows that we want on demand. Now we can even skip the intros on television shows with things like Amazon and Netflix. So we very much have been trained to expect the things that we want right away. And when it comes to our health, we're doing the same thing. We want to see the results instantly, but we don't necessarily want to put in the work or be inconvenienced for it. And if you're going through that, or if you're struggling with that, I would urge you to connect with us. You can do so online. You can comment below. But if you're struggling with your health and making it a priority, or working through the inconvenient part to get to the reward part, I would definitely urge you to find somebody or plug in with someone or a group that can help keep you accountable and encourage you, because it is absolutely worth getting through the inconvenient side to get to the reward side. We just have to push and struggle for a little bit and know that once we get through it, once we break through that, those habits that we've developed over the years that got us to a not so great place with our health, the other side of it is unbelievable, and it is absolutely worth getting to. So plug in, find somewhere or someone that you can connect with. If you need someone online, you can connect through us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/BoldCity, or you can find us even on Instagram by going to @BoldCity, and we would love to encourage you and just push you. Same thing with family and friends. If you are watching this and you don't know who we are at Bold City Chiropractic, I would encourage you to plug in with us, stay connected online, and just see how amazing the other side of the inconvenient part of starting something new is once we get through it. So my general tips, you may write this down or note that you want to come back to this for future, but my general tips is: 1, find your big why. Know why you're doing it, what your drive is, the big thing that is going to just really change your life when you see it happen and when you see it start coming to fruition. It may not be like the 5 or 10 pound weight loss goal, but something bigger. Like we have somebody that came in and just started. They've been going 100% all in with the adjustments, nutrition, exercise, all of the minimizing toxins, cleaning up the household cleaning materials, minimizing stress. And it's because they were given a diagnosis that they may not be around as long, and they wanted to be around so that they could walk their daughter down the aisle. That's a huge big why. Something huge is going to keep you motivated and driving forward when things get challenging, when you want to let off the gas, and even keep you going when things get really, really easy. So for me, my big why is to set an example for our kids to not only live without the fear of diagnosis of heart disease or cancer like we see in our families, but to just live a life abundantly and without fear of it, because that's not even on their radar. They're just doing exactly what they were created for when it comes to their health. Find somebody to keep you accountable. That's what I was talking about before. Finding someone that you can plug in with, a group that will keep you accountable, to keep you pushing forward. Focus on just getting 1% better at a time. We don't have to make a complete radical change going 180 degrees the opposite direction. We just need to get 1% better every single time that we have the opportunity to get better. That comes to nutrition. We make a choice of replacing something that's not so great with something that is the next best option when it comes time to replacing it. Same things with cleaning materials or household supplies, beauty supplies. All of those things can be just improved 1% at a time before falling back into the rut of making these poor decisions. We don't have to try to be 100% better. We just need to get a little bit better each opportunity we have. Starting the day with water is a huge health tip that'll help to stimulate our detox system. It's going to help to hydrate our bodies. It's going to help to eliminate natural toxins throughout the day and promote regularity with going to the bathroom. And then My last two tips, ask yourself, is getting in shape something that you need to get in shape for? And that's okay if it is. If you're not ready to go 100% all in with sprints, we may start with walking or jogging in place. If we're not able to do 100 squats, that may just mean that we sit down in a chair and we stand back up a few times to get our heart rate elevated. Getting in shape to get in shape there's no shame in it. It's just a matter of competing with yourself, no one else around you, and getting better. Again, going back to that, getting better 1% each opportunity we have. So with each workout, we push a little bit harder, and that's perfectly fine. And then lastly, my favorite tip is the question, are we building health or are we building disease? I base every big decision in my life on the basis of that question. Am I moving towards the things that I want, or am I moving away from it? And it sounds extreme, it sounds very black or white, but it is when it comes to our health. We're either moving towards health or we're moving away from it. Even if objectively we have all the markers of being healthy, if we're not pursuing it, we're not doing the things to continue to make us healthy, then we're doing things that are making us less healthy. We're moving away from it. And it is that black or white when it comes to our health. So every opportunity you have, ask yourself that question. Is this going to make me healthier, or is this going to make me less healthy? And if it's going to make you less healthy and you can look yourself in the mirror or look yourself in the face and say, I still want it, then do it. If it doesn't, then make the healthy choice that's going to continue to push you forward and help you to live the healthier, greater lifestyle. So as we get into the nutrition side of things then, we're going to talk about fat, sugar, and protein. And the way we look at these three things is that fat needs to make up the majority of our calories. We're under this myth that fat makes us fat. Fat builds heart disease. Fat's going to lead to heart disease or stroke or whatever. And when we look at it, fat is an essential component of our nutrition, of our life. Our bodies need fat. It helps to absorb nutrients. It helps to protect us from extreme temperatures. It makes up the building blocks of hormones. Our brain functions on fatty acid. Nearly 70% of brain function happens through or utilizes arachidonic acid. Conjugated linolenic acid, or CLA, is a fatty acid that our metabolism uses to burn fat. It reduces inflammation and allows our cells to detox and bring in proper nutrients. So when we look at all of these things, and the reason that we see the health decline of where we're at, hormone issues have been increasing, our weight has been increasing for nearly 40 years, dementia and Alzheimer's or neurodegenerative issues have been increasing for nearly 40 years. What have we been doing for nearly 40 years? We've been on this fat-free, low-fat diet, and all of this is stemming back to we're taking something out that is completely natural for our diet and we're replacing it with other things. And what we're replacing these good, healthy fats with a lot of times is sugar. So when we talk about fat in general, the things that we need to focus on eliminating, there are absolutely fats that we should eliminate from our diet. And those are going to be more processed, man-made fats, factory-made fats that are going to be things like cottonseed or soybean oil or vegetable oil, like the vegetable in quotes, like we don't really know what kind of vegetables are making this oil, but it just says vegetable. Synthetic butters or margarines, canola and corn oil, all of these things are fats that are made in a factory for industrial purposes, not for human purposes. They're made to lubricate machines, not humans. So the fats that we need to consume more of are the minimally processed fats that are going to be in a balanced ratio of omega-3, 6, and 9 fatty acids. And those are going to be things like extra virgin olive oil, avocado, healthy, unrefined coconut oil, not refined coconut oil like the American Heart Association said was so bad for us. They neglected to tell us that they use the fatty acid, the refined version of coconut oil, and this study was funded by the canola industry. What we're talking about is extra virgin unrefined coconut oil or coconut products in general, like coconut milk or coconut flakes that are not sweetened. We want raw nuts and seeds as opposed to roasted nuts and seeds. So even if we're using nut butters, if we get a raw nut butter, that's going to be far healthier than a roasted nut butter. real dairy products that are non-pasteurized. So that's going to be like raw cheese and milk if we're going to be consuming those things. If we aren't able to find that or buy the raw version of this dairy, then we need to be consuming at the very bare minimum grass-fed, 100% grass-fed organic dairy products. Whole fish that is going to be wild caught instead of farm raised, free range pasture raised eggs and chicken or poultry. And then lastly, and most importantly, if we're going to be consuming red meat, the type of protein that's been so warned against, we need to be consuming it in its purest form, and that would be 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef. As opposed to the grain-fed or even just the grass-fed version. And we need to look at the labels of those things and make sure that it's 100% grass-fed, 100% grass-finished to make sure we're getting the most pure forms of these good, healthy fats that our body absolutely can use and can do wonderful things with as long as they're given or consumed in the right amounts. So then, when we talk about fat-free and what it's led to is essentially when we go fat-free, because fat makes a lot of flavor in the foods that we're consuming, they have to add a lot of other things to it. And what they typically add in is going to be sugar. So I want you guys to associate, when you see fat-free, just know that means it's going to be sugar-filled. So fat-free equals sugar-filled. And what I'm talking about specifically, because a lot of times when we do nutrition consults or when I meet one-on-one with people, the thing that I hear most commonly, especially when talking about sugar, is that I don't need a lot of sweets, so I don't really consume much sugar. But what I'm talking about specifically when we look at sugar is the amount of carbohydrates. And most specifically in that is the amount of net carbohydrates. So what that looks like, as an example with goldfish crackers. When you look at the nutrition facts, you'll see that there is less than 1 gram of sugar in a serving of goldfish crackers. But when we look at the nutrition facts and we do a little bit of math, we see that if we subtract the amount of fiber from the total carbohydrates, that's going to give us an amount of net carbohydrates. And that's actually what your body's going to be using as sugar, converting into sugars and causing inflammation, causing dysfunction or blood sugar imbalances. So with the example of goldfish crackers, there's 19 grams carbohydrates, there's 2 grams of dietary fiber. That means there's actually 17 grams net carbohydrates, which will actually be 17 grams of sugar. Even though the added sugar is going to say less than 1 gram, what your body's going to convert or break down into sugars is actually going to be 17 grams of sugar from something like goldfish crackers. That's led us to this point where we consume as a culture nearly 70 pounds of sugar and 165 pounds of high fructose corn syrup per person or per American every single year for every single American. That's outrageous. And if we try to limit sugar, our options are then the processed or the artificial version, things like the pink packets, aspartame, or the yellow packets like Splenda or sucralose, even the blue packets. All of these synthetic or artificial sweeteners actually do more harm than good. So if you are going to consume something, they've actually found through research that you're better off consuming the non-diet version than the diet version, especially if you're trying to focus on something like weight loss. So a Diet Coke is actually going to be more of a hindrance for weight loss than something like a regular Coca-Cola. Even though both of them are terrible for you, the diet version of these things, because of the artificial sweeteners, are so much more worse for you. You're better off consuming the regular Coke and just consume less of it. But again, that goes back to the getting 1% better. If we're at a point where we're consuming, 3-4 cans of Diet Coke every single day, maybe the 1% version of getting better is consuming just 1 can of regular soda. We save it or we spread it out over the course of the day rather than consuming that. Or we're going to consume maybe soda, but then we're going to sandwich it with 2 glasses of water before and then 2 glasses of water afterwards. All of those things are going to be getting better, but the best version of that is to eliminate them completely. So when we talk about sweeteners, the number one option is going to be a plant-based version of a sweetener, and that's going to be something like stevia or monk fruit. The other options that are going to be okay, but you're going to want to limit, would be erythritol or xylitol. Those are both sugar alcohols that can cause some digestive distress, but then also we run the risk of them being genetically modified if they're made from something like corn. So you have to look at the labeling with that. Then when we look at the other things like honey or maple syrup or molasses, all of those things are going to be inflammatory as well. So we need to make sure that we're consuming them very, very minimally, like 1 or 2 servings per week. That means 1 to 2 teaspoons per week for things like honey or maple syrup or molasses. So as we get back into the nutrition side of things, we're going to talk about ways that we can focus on fat burning, especially in regards to exercise, how we can allow our body to burn fat more efficiently, especially for longer periods of time, and how nutrition and exercise and toxicity all play into that. One of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to a healthy metabolic response, burning fat really efficiently, is the idea of training in a way that is going to be more designed or more specific to burning fat. If you've ever worked out on any sort of cardio equipment, I'm sure you've seen the little graph where it says fat burning zone, cardio zone, and the idea of exercising at a way or at an intensity that allows your body to burn more fat during exercise, is great on paper, but in reality, it's not the most efficient way to get the biggest impact in regards to fat burning and a really efficient metabolism. If you think about it, if you're exercising in a way that's going to burn fat for 2 hours, you're working out at an intensity they consider 70% of your maximum heart rate. 60 to 70% is considered the fat burning zone. But the problem with that is as soon as you get out of it, your body stops burning fat. But the way we want to talk about training at Bold City is a very high intensity, so it's 80 to 90% of maximum for a short period of time. And you allow your body to go in and out of this zone in work and recover for anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes. The beauty of that is they found that with research, they did a study and they found that participants that worked out in the 80 to 90% of their maximum heart rate zone for as little as 12 to 20 minutes had a more efficient fat burning response, meaning it took up to 36 hours for their metabolism to return back to normal. That's huge when we're talking about exercise because that's going to allow your body to be more efficient at burning fat. It's going to have more of an anabolic response versus the more catabolic response that long duration, moderate intensity exercise is going to have. And it's also going to stabilize hormones, increase positive ratios between estrogen, testosterone, growth hormone, insulin. All of those areas are going to be impacted far more greatly when we're exercising at a short duration at a higher intensity. So keep in mind that when we're talking about exercise and all the benefits of it, it's easy to get swept up into the idea of working out at 80 to 90%, but maybe not having the greatest way of tracking it. My go-to tip for anybody that's just starting out with exercise is not to get swept up in tracking heart rate, worrying about what your pulse is, breaking your momentum with a workout to see where your heart rate is. Just know that if we're talking about exercise and getting the right level of intensity, we need to be not able to have a conversation with the people that we're working out with. It's all great to bring your accountability group to have your tribe with you and exercise with, but just know that you shouldn't be able to have that conversation with those people while you're working. Save that for afterwards when you're trying to catch your breath. Then you want to talk and recap the workout. But while you're working, it should be at an intensity that doesn't allow for you to have a conversation with your workout partner. And the reason that this is so important, the reason that we want to get the intensity up at that level for that length of time is because they found through the Journal of Applied Physiology, they found that exercise is not only a good idea, it's an essential component for humans. We have to have a certain amount of movement every single day. And if we aren't satisfying that, it sets us up for metabolic dysfunction and ultimately metabolic disorders. So physical inactivity over a long enough period of time is going to lead to metabolic dysfunction. That metabolic dysfunction over a long enough period of time leads to metabolic disorders. And that's things like type 2 diabetes and cancer, hardening of our arteries, that the depression, neurological diseases, all of these things, when we aren't satisfying the requirement for movement that humans have, lead to an adaptation, a genetic adaptation that forces a switch in this metabolic disorder. So what we're talking about specifically with Max T3 is going to be focusing on the time, the type, and the tempo of your workout. So we want for the time component, it's very short, efficient workouts that we're working out at a high intensity, which would focus on the type or the tempo. The type could involve body weight movements, metabolic conditioning type exercises, gymnastics, sprints. We can incorporate body weight free weights, different types of exercise to satisfy the type component, as long as we're getting our heart rate up to that 80 to 90% for that short duration, allowing it to come back down, and then building it back up for a total of 12 to 20 minutes. We're going to have the most efficient exercise, the most time efficient way to have the biggest results in stabilizing hormones, burning fat, building muscle, balancing and stabilizing blood sugar, increasing lung capacity, VO2 max, and ultimately increasing our overall heart health. So the other component then, what we look at with exercise, weight loss, fat burning, and nutrition is the toxicity component. That's a huge overlooked component that we sometimes have no idea the effects that it's having until we're no longer able to see the results that we were seeing maybe while we first started exercise, we hit that plateau, or it takes us a lot longer to actually see the results that we would expect to see with working out, because our body's holding on to these toxins and it's not allowing us to burn any more fat. So what we're talking about with toxins specifically is looking at our food supply. In the reality that the FDA, the company or the organization that's supposed to be policing food manufacturers, has actually allowed over 3,000 food additives into our nutrition, into the things that we're consuming on a daily basis. It's actually gotten to the point where the average American consumes over 140 to 150 pounds of additives every single person, every single year. And the FDA is at a point where they're unable to keep up with the additives that these food companies are allowed to use with the things that they're producing. So they're asking these companies to police themselves, so to speak. There was actually a study, an article done in the Jacksonville, the Times-Union, where they looked at it and they said that they're unable to keep up with the new additives, and it's gotten to the point where they've had to ask food manufacturers to police themselves, to watch themselves in the foods that they're producing. So some of the major things that we're going to be looking at would be things like sodium nitrite, sodium nitrate, high fructose corn syrup, MSG, which has about 15 to 20 different names or variants for it, refined dyes, refined sugars, refined flours and refined sugar, artificial dyes, additives and preservatives, and pesticides. So the best way to get caught up in this is to know what you're looking at and not get caught up in this, not to get caught up in all the marketing and the traps that are set in the grocery store, is to come to one of our Shop Like the Doc workshops, where we actually take you through Publix. We'll show you how to read labels. We'll show you what things to look for when it comes to good quality nutrients, what things to look out for when it comes to the more potentially toxic forms of food. And then the reason why Dr. Aaron and I spent so much time looking at these, finding and selecting the best options, and how you can incorporate them in a sequential order if budgeting is a concern for the family. If you don't have maybe the room in the budget to completely overhaul the grocery shopping, then you can pick some of the most important areas to start with first, and then add these things in as you get more room in the budget for them. So to get signed up for that, all you have to do is text our text line, the 904-321-9629. You can get signed up for the next Shop Like the Doc. Spaces are limited, but if you text 904-321-9629, we can reserve that spot for you or put you on the wait list if all the spaces are reserved. But that's the easiest way to get started right away on the practical side of nutrition. Where exercise and toxicity roll into one another, from a fat burning standpoint, we see a lot more people having trouble with weight loss resistance when there's a toxicity component. So nutrition and toxicity are huge in supporting the positive impact that's associated with exercise, but then also exercise has a huge way of allowing our body to eliminate toxins through sweat. They've actually found that through exercise and through sweating, you actually release various toxins from the fat cells, and then when we sweat them out, it releases things like heavy metals, BPA, other types of acids that are going to be more acidic when the ratios are thrown off in our body. So exercising to the point where we're not only unable to carry on the conversation, we want to be out of breath while we're exercising, we also need to be sweating afterwards. And again, if we focus on just working as hard as we're able to work out for that 12 to 15 minute period of time, the fat burning side of things, the sweating component, the metabolic response that we need to have with exercise takes care of itself, as long as we're putting in the work and focusing on just working as hard as we're able to, always getting that 1% better with each opportunity. So your 5 immediate changes you can make right away with nutrition, exercise, toxicity is number 1, eat more vegetables. It's going to allow our body to balance pH. It's going to eliminate the room that we have in our stomachs for adding things that are going to be more refined or processed, more inflammatory, that may cause blood sugar imbalances. We're going to replace our conventional animal proteins, the non-organic versions, with at the very bare minimum organic. But if we have the room and we need to consume, if we're going to be consuming animal products like red meat, it has to be 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. And again, if we don't have the room, then we fall back on number 1. We're going to start eating more vegetables again. We're going to remove the bad fats and replace them with good, healthy fats. So we're going to remove canola oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, roasted nuts and seeds, and we're going to replace them with extra virgin olive oil, extra virgin unrefined coconut oil or coconut products. We're going to go raw nuts and seeds, and we're going to use those for snacks in place of the more inflammatory fatty acids, like the potato chips or the things that are going to be fried in those damaging oils. We're going to pick 3 days per week that we exercise and get our heart rate elevated to 80 to 90% of our maximum. And then lastly, we're going to avoid processed foods that have refined grains, sugars, and artificial colors. If we do those 5 things, we're going to be go far, far and away from what's gotten us to this point culturally where we see inflammation, where we see all these health issues. And again, we're just going to be building health, doing exactly what we were created to do. So those 5 things are to eat more vegetables, replace conventional animal proteins with organic, natural proteins. We're going to remove bad fats, replace them with the healthy, minimally processed fats, picking 3 days that we exercise to 80 to 90% of our maximum heart rate, and then we're going to avoid processed foods, refined grain, refined sugar, and artificial colors. So we went through a lot of information in a relatively quick period of time. If you have any questions, comment below. Connect with us online. You can connect via Facebook by going to facebook.com/BoldCity. You can connect via Instagram by going to Instagram, and that's @BoldCity. Or you can message directly by commenting down below in the comments section. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, let us know. We'd love to hear from it. Otherwise, we're going to let you guys go. Have a great night.